Hey everyone, I'm Joe and I'm here to show you how to prepare your adventure in Dudes on a Map. So to start with, you'll want to add your maps using the Add Map button up here in the top left. You simply have to give your map a name and choose an image file to load. Dudes on a Map doesn't have any required or really necessary integration of various drawing tools like Dungeon Draft or um, Dungeon Scrawl. You simply need anything that can export into an image file. PNGs are usually the best, but anything will work. And Dudes on a Map will load your image file and give you the ability to overlay a grid onto your map. You can overlay it with Fog of War here, as well as mark it up with annotation tools. So if you have some small edits or anything you want to mark on the map, you can do that there. And you can add your tokens here from the bottom right and save your map for use later on down the line. If you end up with more maps than you can manage, you can come over to the campaign settings tab and select which ones show up in your little hotbar and delete old maps if you want to. There's no real performance impact for having too many maps loaded or too many maps in your options here, unless you start to get into the ridiculous amounts, which most campaigns probably will not see. Um, it's worth noting this is also where you configure all of your options for the campaign. There's a whole other tutorial segment on that you can find in this playlist. All right, so starting out, Dudes on a Map doesn't apply a scale to your map. It simply asks you to say how big do you want a standard token to be. So here we have a 40 pixel size token and you can scale it up as needed. Um, if you like the free movement on your map like so, and it's already got a grid, or you have a regional map or something like that that doesn't require a grid, you can use the scale option here to associate a certain number of pixels with a number of map units. And somewhat counterintuitively, the grid alignment tool here can be used to set the scale up. So if your map has a scale in the bottom right, or the standard little black and white bar for scaling, um, you can use this tool to select any distance on your map and correlate that with a distance in feet or meters or miles or kilometers, whatever works best for you. I do plan at some point to expand that to include other types of units for space travel and stuff like that. So here we selected a range and we'll say that that's 20 feet. Now we can use our token movement. We'll read out how far that distance is based on the scale we select. So if we select a 5-foot square and call it 5 feet, we get pretty accurate movement representation on almost no effort. Um, you can expand that further by adding in a grid. The grid brings snapping of your tokens on the map and a little more precise but not accurate uh, movement measurement. So you're so adding the grid brings in grid-based movement rules instead of more exact pixel-based movement. Now you'll notice that we carried over the grid size from our scale, but it's not quite exact or uh, in the right spot. So this grid alignment tool will get rid of the grid, and all you need to do is select a couple points. Near the top right is usually a good idea. And you select the range like so, and it will give you a progressing set of grid lines in one direction of your map. And all you need to do is find a spot where those grid lines need to snap to near the end of the map. It's worth noting if you're way off at the start, you may have to correct it in the middle as well before it gets too far out of alignment. But here our grid is pretty easy to get close enough, especially with smaller grid sized cells. It's good to go um, along the distance of the map and set it every once in a while instead. So we're done aligning our grid, and as you can see, it's a pretty darn good match. Um, and once you know what you're doing, that only takes a couple seconds to set up. Um, let's see. So we've got a grid on our map. Now we can add fog of war by simply using any number of our tools. We select the tool we want to do and the layer. So we'll go ahead and start with a fill tool here. We can mark our secret wall here. We can use our snapping and our rectangle, and we'll mark this area with secret fog. Secret fog is simply an extension of the regular fog. And what it does is it allows you to pretty rapidly clear an area of fog without worrying about revealing hidden information. So here we cleared all the fog from this area, but if we wanted to get rid of this, all we'd have to do is select the secret fog layer and clear that too. In addition to the fogs, we also have a map annotation layer. You can select a color for your drawing. The mouse wheel will increase the ink size on this brush, and you can make a drawing on top of your map, or when I've introduced the whiteboarding feature, you can draw on your whiteboard this way to draw dungeons a little more easily. If you need to do something off the cuff, it's great for that, or something where a lot of precision or things like that aren't really necessary. Dudes on a Map isn't really an art program. It's more of a way to take maps you already have and use them online. But some rudimentary drawing tools are never wrong to have around. Hitting escape will return your layer and your tool to the defaults, since it's generally used, or the most frequently used features are the fog and the rectangle tool. That's what we bring you back to. In addition, it's worth noting that left clicking in Dudes on a Map is what we do to draw, and right clicking is what you do to erase. So here we can quickly add and remove things as needed with those two, with the same tool selection. It's worth noting fog is opaque for you, or is a bit transparent for you. For your players, when you play the game, that fog, whether it's secret fog or regular fog, is going to appear pitch black, and will be indistinguishable from the edge of the map. Let's see. So real quickly, we'll go through all the tools you have available here. So you have the rectangular tool, which draws and erases a rectangular shape, obviously. When you're drawing lines, it will just draw the outline. And that's the same for all of these tools except for the brush and line tools, which don't do outlines, but rather a shape or a drawn line. All right, so we've covered the rectangle. The circle tool, you can also scroll your mouse wheel to select an arc instead of a full circle. And you can also use that while you're in game in particular. It comes with some measurement tools if you're using a marker, so it makes a great spell template. And the same is kind of true for the rectangle as well. The brush tool simply draws wherever you take your mouse cursor. If I turn off snap, it follows a lot more closely. If hitting shift or clicking this selection box up here will disable snap. Shift takes it off temporarily, or you can permanently remove it. And while you're drawing with the brush, you can scroll your mouse wheel to increase the size of your brush tool. The line tool is similar. You can increase and decrease the brush size that way. The line tool, while you hold your mouse button down, is free-handed, and when you release, you can click to drag to various area or multiple points, so you can have a more straight line behavior. And when you're all done, you simply double click or hit enter to complete the line drawing. And similarly, our polygon tool here, you can freehand or click for corner points on your polygon. And when you're done, simply double click to complete the shape. And so you can draw polygons while erasing or clearing fog. And last but not least is the fill tool. The fill tool is good to use if you want to clear your map, simply from the respect that it clears all the previous drawing operations that you've done on that layer. So when we erased all that, it actually will speed up drawing slightly, especially if you use a map a lot and erase and add to it frequently. Doing a fill to clear it or set the whole thing to be fog again will prevent things from slowing down over a long period of time. Um, this left click or this tool here is designed for use during play mostly. It makes it so that your left click button simply pans your map around instead of drawing, and your right click is a rectangular erase. This was the original way that Dudes on a Map worked, and I brought it in with our new tool-based drawing situation here so that it's a relatively easy way to play the game, since you're mostly moving along with the players as they explore an area and revealing things to them. This tool is designed to make that the most intuitive process possible. And you'll find that this is your default when you press escape while you are playing the game. The last tools here are two different ruler options. There's the freehand ruler that will follow your mouse cursor around. You can measure any distance in pixels. However, when you're using this ruler, it's worth noting that diagonal rules for grid movement aren't applied for obvious reasons. This is just a pixel-based distance conversion. If you want to measure token movement, you can use the grid ruler, and it will simply measure along your grid lines how far a token movement would be. So if you want to plan out your moves for various tokens, you can do that with this tool. And of course, clicking on a token and dragging it around also does the same thing. It's worth noting that as the DM, a lot of the things that you do, such as moving a token or measuring or drawing, there are no previews for. And the same is true for fog and things like that. The players don't see a lot of the things you do, and instead they're left in the dark until you reveal changes to the players. We'll get into that a little more in the gameplay-oriented tutorial, but it's worth mentioning here as well. All right, so here we've got our adventure map crudely drawn out, and we can now add some tokens to it. Eventually, I'll have the ability for you to hide this fog layer, but that's a feature that got lost in the shuffle of the new drawing tools and hasn't been brought back just yet. All right, so excuse me, we got to get over to our token manager here. And So here you can add new tokens to your adventure. To do that, all you have to do is provide a name and select an image for said token. You can set the number of the number of squares that the token occupies. So if you don't have a grid, this is just a multiplier. Otherwise, the grid calculates the correct size for the image to fit inside of your grid and take up the appropriate size multiplier. So 2 would be like a large creature in D&D. And you can choose how the token is displayed. So by default, a token shows whatever name you gave it along with a number. So if you have a group of bandits, you can place them all, and you'll have bandits 1 through 5, for example, and that'll give you some players something to refer to when they're attacking different targets and things like that. So by default, you can see that number, but if you don't want your big bad evil guy to be known as number 1 Steve, you can disable the numbering. And if you want the token to be completely mysterious, you can hide the name you've given it as well. You can always come in here and change that rule. Not every token needs to have an item in the token drawer, however, because if you click on a token over here, you're able to completely change these settings as well. So even though this was placed as a generic token, we can create a new name for the token, hide its number, and give it an image. And now it's a more personalized token. So if you have a one-off boss or some other new NPC, you don't need to clutter your token drawer with these one-off characters. You can just add them to the game like so. And if your players ever encounter them again, you can simply do the same. But your token drawer down here, if you double click a token, you can set it to be a favorite, so it's quick and handy. Like if your adventure has a bunch of bandits, you can have that at the ready in advance. And you can customize other display options. So if something gets enlarged during the course of a fight, you can, I've got a ruler tool on there. You can increase its size to reflect that pretty easily. You can also select the token color that you want to place down here. So each token, as you can see, the numbering gets increased. If you switch what you're placing, it resets that numbering. We don't look up what's already out there. So if you switch to a new token and then come back, you're creating a new group of characters there. But you can manually adjust that here, or before you start placing, you can set your index and it will count up from where you tell it. So it's a pretty simple system there. It generally is designed so that each encounter throughout a dungeon should be numbered correctly without any intervention, but it's not omnipotent, and sometimes you'll have to give it a helping hand. It's worth noting we typically add tokens during prep as deactivated. Deactivated tokens won't show up in your initiative list when you roll for initiative during the game, and they aren't visible to players until you activate them. So you can place, for example, if there are a bunch of skeletons in your crypts here, you can place your skeleton tokens here. The players won't see them until somebody goes rummaging through the crypt and triggers all of the skeletons waking up. You simply go through double clicking each token and they pop up. And that should cover just about everything for tokens. Another shortcut key, well, a whole host of shortcut keys can be found here in the bottom left. It tells you all the different little tricks to using dudes on a map's hotkeys. And there's a similar button for players and during the game as well. There are slight changes in, depending on your context, hotkeys do what, but for the most part, it's pretty consistent. And that should be everything you need to know to get Dudes on a Map prepared for your first adventure. Um, it's worth noting that while there's a little bit to learn here, my hope is that everything is intuitive. If there are things that don't make a lot of sense at first blush, I'm honestly interested in fixing that so that people joining Dudes on a Map don't have to watch a tutorial necessarily to figure everything out. So if you are struggling with some facet of Dudes on a Map before you watch this tutorial video, I'd love to hear what that was and maybe any thoughts you have on how that could be made easier. Um, Hopefully this is one of the easier uh, solutions that you've explored, and that was kind of my goal setting out with this project, was to make something that didn't need a lot of explanation to be used. So that's everything you need to know to get your prep done, and I hope you had fun and informational video time. Have a good day.